All right, well, I will go ahead and get started. So yes, today is recycled art, and I especially wanted to do a couple of projects using old t-shirts. The clothing industry is the second largest cause of pollution for us, so definitely better to reuse your old shirts than it is, or donate them than it is to just throw them out. So if you have a t-shirt, an old t-shirt of about this size, if we cut it in a particular way, you can actually wind up with one continuous string of yarn. And this, although I know this still looks like a lot of yarn, it was actually almost double this size from a sweater that I did a couple days ago. I just used quite a bit of it for a project already. So you get a lot of yarn from one shirt, and you can use this yarn for knitting, crocheting, anything else that you would normally use it for. So it's definitely a really good trick. I have one, I'm gonna start it off, and then I have another one that's already halfway done because it takes a little bit of time and I don't think you need to just watch me cutting for that long. But the first thing you wanna do with a basic t-shirt, or you could do it with a tank top, or like I said, a long sleeve sweater, but we wanna cut off the sleeves part. So just a straight line underneath the sleeves here. And you also wanna cut off any bottom hem. So this bottom part here, about 1 inch, you want to cut that off as well. So we just have a nice straight kind of tube of fabric to work with. And those hems just kind of get in the way when we're making our yarn part. All right, so I see another person joined. If you could just keep your audio off and the video off, because we'll be posting this recording, that would be great. All right, so like I said, we're starting with t-shirt yarn for anybody who just joined, and we're just cutting off the top part where the sleeves are, and then we're going to cut off the bottom hem as well. Okay, if you're more precise than I am, I tend to get impatient. You definitely could use a ruler and draw this out before with a Sharpie so you have a perfectly straight line. I'm just not that type of person. I wish I was. But that definitely would make everything more precise. Okay, so once you get that top part, like I said, then we want to cut off this bottom hem. Okay, good. We have more people joining. I'm just going to keep saying it. Just make sure that we keep the video off and the audio off for privacy purposes, since we will be posting this. All right. And I'll re-explain this step one more time since we're still having people join in, which is great. Okay, so what I've done so far, if you just joined in, this was just a regular old t-shirt. I'm turning it into one continuous string of yarn that we can use for crocheting or knitting projects, whatever you'd want. I cut off the sleeve portion, and then I cut off the bottom hem. So what you should wind up with is just this tube of fabric, right? So you don't have to do this with a t-shirt. It could be an old sweater. It could be a tank top. But basically you just want to use your common sense to cut it so that we have this kind of even tube of fabric. Okay. So then what we're going to do, and actually I am going to hop up and bend my camera down a little bit further. Excuse me here. So you can see what I'm doing. I'm going to take the ends that are connected. So this side and this side are my open ends of my tube, and this are my closed side. I'm going to fold over one closed side almost perfectly to the other end, but I'm going to leave about 1 inch. So hopefully you can see that there. I can move it a little closer. I folded it over almost perfectly, but I'm going to leave it there. When we make our cuts, we're going to be cutting vertically like this. You're going to cut through the top part, but leave this uncut. Okay, that's what's going to wind up allowing you to have your continuous string. So I'll show you once here. You can just start cutting here. And again, the more precise you are, if you wanted to measure this with a ruler and do perfectly 1 inch strips, that would be great. The wider they are, the thicker your yarn is going to be. So it's just up to you. I'm not that audio? I'm gonna. All right, perfect. So I'm not that precise. If you are, that's great. You can just mark it with a Sharpie. I've just been doing strips like this, kind of eyeballing it, and it works out pretty well. So again, I'm cutting all the way, but once I go over this first part here, I'm going to make sure to not cut through my second fold. Right. So again, from here, just to check yourself, because I know it's kind of hard to see, you should be cutting through 4 pieces of fabric all the way to the end, cutting through the first fold, but leaving this one connected. All right, hopefully that's clear for everybody. We'll do one more, and then I'm going to switch to my pre-cut one to show you the next step, because this can be kind of the most time-consuming part of it. You're just going to continue doing that all the way along this. When you finish that step, I'm going to trade this out, and I have one here. Hopefully I can move it over without ruining it. Okay. So you'll see here, this one was actually interesting. The stripes on the shirt made it really easy to cut without having to measure it, because I just followed the lines. These ones wound up being quite precise. What you're going to do is take that folded part, it's folded over like this. You're going to pull it open and then separate it out. And then we're going to do that all the way along the t-shirt. You pull one. And if you started one, if you're following along and you want to just try this part, it won't ruin it, even if you haven't finished all the way along. So if you just want to do it with me to make sure you're getting it, that's totally fine. All right. If you are going to do this with your kids, or if you're a younger one watching, when you're cutting through the 4 pieces of fabric, you want to make sure you have sharp enough scissors, because if you don't, you're going to be pressing a lot harder. And I remember that's actually, I got a really bad cut on my finger when I was younger from doing it that way.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Because we tried to send it through the chat. This said it was for ages 9+.
Yes, so if you came in late, that's good. I'm glad I can read.
No, we've been on, but it's going a little bit fast for them, and they're having a hard time like seeing what you're doing.
Yeah, so the way that we have been working these, and let me see if I can bend down to see you, is that there will be a recorded version.
Okay, that's what I was wondering.
Yep, so that's what I was saying. So we want to make sure that the videos are off and the sound is off, so that we ensure privacy for everyone.
Okay, so if there's a recorded version, that would be really helpful, because then we can go back and watch it, because I don't want to interrupt you.
Yeah, absolutely. So they're posted, it's going to be posted on the event page right after. So yep, you can follow along as much as you can here to get the idea of what's happening. And then if you do want to do just a step-by-step, watch the recorded version, pause it, and go at your own pace. Thank you. I'm sorry that I didn't quite see it in the chat box. All right, here we go. So we will continue here. Okay, so once these strips are out, the most important part that I can show you, we need to make a cut from the bottom right of one of these strips to the upper right of the other. So we're going to be making a diagonal cut here. So if I was to just cut this strip, you can kind of imagine what would wind up happening is I would just cut this loop off of the rest of my shirt. But I want to have one continuous ball of yarn. So I'm going to be going from this base and cutting diagonally to the top of my next loop. And I'll show this a few times because this is the trickiest part. Hold on, let me just get this one here. Okay. So once we have this, you'll see it start to fold apart. So then you have this base. I'm going to cut from this base diagonally to the top right of my next strip. So base right to the top right, a diagonal from one of these loops to the next. Okay. And so then just to show it again, we have the base, diagonal. It's hard to see. Let me try to separate out my fabric. Okay. So this was my next loop, my last loop that I cut. I'm going from the base to the top diagonal. And you should see it start to make this continuous string of fabric. So just try to keep it piled up in one corner. And then once you get the hang of the pattern, it goes pretty quick here. So base to top diagonal. Oops, I should have mentioned if you have a tag on the inside, if you had it on the top, it would have been cut off automatically. If it's on the inside, you just need to cut that off. Base to top. And you can, like I said, once you start to get the hang of it, you can just kind of go straight from one to the next. Okay, I'm down to my last two here. So base, top, okay, and my last. All right, so that's all gone correctly. We have this big long string of yarn. Okay, so then when you want to actually make it into kind of a more tubed form, because you can still see it's pretty straight and thick here, if you stretch it out as you go, it'll start to form that tubed form. So the more you stretch it, the more it'll tube. I like to just stretch it as I put it into the ball of yarn, because then it'll kind of stay stretched as it's resting in that ball of yarn before you're ready to use it again. Okay. So then I wanted to show you, I'm going to bump this up a little bit more. I pushed it too far down last time. One project that you actually could do with this yarn quickly, and again, I'm not going to go through the whole thing. I'm going to demonstrate it, and then hopefully you get an idea or get inspired, and you can take this and complete your own project later, or rewatch the recorded version on the event page. But I just want to roll this up for you so you see just how much you actually get out of one. And this was actually a very small t-shirt. Let's see here. All right, so you see, we ended up getting quite a large ball. And this was a small t-shirt. This was a cropped shirt. So you might actually have about twice this much from a regular adult-sized t-shirt. So you get quite a bit of fabric out of it. The easy project that I like, especially for kids to do with this, is to make a pencil holder. And you can do this with the t-shirt yarn and any plastic cup that you happen to have hanging around. It's a nice weaving project, so it also helps get kids into weaving. So I know we didn't put this on the supplies because I just wanted to quickly show you an example of something you could do. If you don't knit and you don't crochet, there's still a lot of projects you can do with this yarn. So just to give you some ideas that you can take and do later. If you take any cup, the most important thing is that you're going to cut an odd number of strips into it. So it doesn't matter, you could do as low as 5 or as high as 11. I think that I did 11 here. If I hold this up closer to you guys, you can see those sections. So 11 makes nice small sections, but if you want to make it easier, you could do less. But the important part is that it's odd. If it's even, your weaving won't work right. So basically, again, depending on how precise you are, you could take a marker on the top of your cup and kind of mark out your sections. Okay, so there I have my, I don't know if you can see, but I just marked 11 pretty even sections around the top. And then you would cut a strip all the way down to the bottom. And you want to leave that base there. Most plastic cups do have kind of a pre-made base. So you don't want to cut through that because we still need a base for the holder to actually be sturdy on. But you cut down as far as you can through all of these strips. And again, for time, since I'm not going to be going through this whole thing, it's just another idea of a recycled craft that you can do. Once you had cut all these strips, you take a piece of your yarn and slide it down in between two of them, and then you're going to be weaving in and out. So this first one, I would go on the outside, and then the next would go on the inside. And then my next one would go out, and then I would continue that weaving pattern all the way around the cup. Once you got around to the other side, then this one that it had gone behind on, the next time you go around, if you do an odd number of slits, it'll be up on top. Okay? So then, this one, the only thing that I'll say is it takes more time than you would think, and so it takes more time and it takes a lot of yarn for it to actually look all put together because you have to keep going through it and pushing down the yarn each time to make sure that there's no kind of spots showing in between. And then of course you can switch colors halfway through if you wanted to. Real simple, you just slide in the new color and get started with it. Okay, so that is the t-shirt yarn craft. The next thing I wanted to show you that you could do with an old t-shirt is to make a produce bag. So this one I've been doing with tank tops. I think it's easier. There's just less fabric, but you can still do it with a t-shirt. I have my sample here. I don't actually have any produce to show you in it because I haven't been able to go, obviously. With the quarantine and the restrictions, I haven't been to the store, but I did put just a few other things in it. So it has these holes here those are just for air purposes of ventilation if you were to actually put fresh oranges or lemons or whatever you were going to be carrying in it. It looks kind of silly with my peanut butter jar in there. I promise it works a lot better with actual produce. And depending on what you plan to use this bag for, these slits could be much smaller. All right, so let me go ahead. Yeah, see, my peanut butter jar just fell right out of it. If you have another t-shirt or tank top, we're going to be doing for this one is again cutting off the top sleeves. So whether that's your t-shirt sleeves, long sleeve sleeves, or no sleeves, we just got to cut off that top portion there. Okay. That was not my most even cutting job that I've ever done. So again, you could get a ruler. Trying to get through a few in here, so being less precise than I could be. Okay, once you've done that, you can also cut off the bottom hem if you want to. It'll just make it easier. So this kind of depends on how you want to close up the bottom of your bag. I'm doing a no-sew bag, so I'm going to, and I'll show you this, cut strips and then tie little bows for the bottom. If you were to sew it, you could keep the hem or you could get rid of the hem, whatever makes more sense for your sewing plan. I'm just going to leave it because it doesn't affect the ties for me. The next step we're going to do, and you can see I've already drawn out kind of an outline, is make what we want the handle to look like. It's usually just kind of a curve like this. If you want it to be perfectly symmetrical, the easiest way to do it is to just flip it in half. And then that way, when you draw your outline, whatever you cut it out as, it'll already be symmetrical on the other side. So you fold it in half and then cut the handle here. Okay. Once we have cut the handle, we need to make our slits, and then we also want to make a little hole for the handle. So keeping it folded in half, I'm going to draw a little rectangle here. This will be my handle for my bag. And then I'm going to do a few slits down the middle. This time I'm going to do them a little smaller than my first one, and I'm not going to take them as far down. Remember, you're going to be having to sew this bottom together. So I would want to leave around 2 inches at the base. So for me, that's here, just empty, whether that's for tying or sewing. And also you just don't want your slits down that low because things will start to fall out. So I'm just going to do a few small ones here. Okay, and then you can go ahead and take your scissors and cut through, keeping it in half so that everything is already nice and symmetrical. Okay, and then for these ones, you can just literally do a one-cut slit. Oh, and see what I was just saying about sharp scissors, mine are starting to go. I'm gonna make this a lot more difficult. Okay. The easiest way I found to do the side slits, if you want 3 rows of slits, is to fold it or unfold it so you're back to your normal. And then we'll go ahead and just fold this part to the center. Let me get it evened out again. So this part I'll fold to here, and then I can do 1, 2, 3 slits right like that. Okay, and we can do the same on the other side. So flip back over here. Make sure, and I'm kind of rushing because I'm trying to get through a lot of projects in a short amount of time. But you want to make sure there aren't any of these folds because they're going to make your slits come out kind of wonky, which happened here, but I'll fix it. We'll show you how you can fix it. Okay. Do that. Fold it over, and then we'll do 3 more slits. Again, if you want to be precise, draw them out before, but I find that these kind of just work almost foolproof. Okay. So now I have the basis of my bag. The only problem being, of course, that there's no bottom to it. So if we take this and then really simply, I guess even I would draw a line for this one just to make sure that I have that even bottom. So I would just do kind of a dotted line across about 2 inches up the top. Okay. And then you're just going to start cutting strips. These strips you're going to wind up tying together. So however thick or thin you want them to be, it's up to you. But too thick, it'll be hard, and there might be a larger gap, and it would taper your bag in quite a bit more. So it would kind of bring it in like that at the bottom, instead of it just being, you know, the normal size all the way through. Okay, so once I've gotten to the end, I'm going to actually just cut a little slit in between my 2 different layers so that these 2 are pieces that I could tie as well. Same thing on this side. You'll see that those 2 slits are still connected by the side seam, so I'm just going to cut through that. Okay, then our last step is to take 2 of these at a time and just tie a real simple double knot in each of them. So this will connect your back and your front. And I might not go all the way through these. We'll see how much time it's going to take. But I'll show you again the final product. So you can see, if you don't like the looks of the bows, you could definitely do this and then turn it inside out. You just want to pay attention to then when you start tying this, making the slits and tying the bows, you want that to be on the inside of your bag rather than the outside. I think it looks kind of nice with the bows on the outside, but that's totally up to you. Okay, so I've done a few here. You can see you would just keep on going. And I'm going to show you the final part again. I'm going to take out, you know, that peanut butter. These things, just without it being actual produce, does not work the way that I wanted it to. I think I just got excited and was dreaming about being able to go back to the stores regularly again or something, without realizing that I couldn't. Okay, so this is the final bag. Oops, my handle got tucked in between. So you can see that I actually had been planning on mine to flip it inside out. You can see the tag there. But I ended up liking the look of those bows at the bottom. But if you wanted to put it inside out, I'll show you what it would look like. You can still see the ties. It's just not quite as much of the bow look, I guess. Maybe a little cleaner, but I kind of just liked the look of them. So that's totally up to you. And then you have your little bag. All right, so I'll wait and see if anybody had any questions on that or the t-shirt yarn. You could throw them in the chat box. Like I said, this will be up on the Facebook page, so I know I'm going quick, but hopefully it's enough to give you an idea of some things that you can do, and then finish them when we're done here at your own pace. Right, so let's see if there's any questions, and we'll move on to the centerpieces. Oh, and actually, I'm going to bump this up again just a little bit. And I'm also going to go grab one of my other ones. I had to hide it. Apologize for that. I have 2 cats and they were destroying these flowers all morning, so I had to go move it from my little workstation. Okay, so for our centerpieces, this one is really, you can get really, really creative with it and totally based on what you have around your house because, like I said, we can't really go out and buy whatever art supplies we want. So I have a couple of different ones to show you that I made earlier. This one was just out of an old salsa jar. So definitely glass jars work. I like that there's the little clear poking out from it. And then this one was out of an old coffee tin. My main suggestion for making these kinds of centerpieces would be to work with the material that you have. So for this coffee tin, you know, it already had that silver and it already had ridges in the side. So when you work with it, rather than trying to cover all of it up, it usually winds up looking a lot nicer than if you were just to slab on some paper, decorative paper, over an already existing, maybe pretty material or interesting structure. So the main idea with these is to take any sort of decorative paper that you have. So that could be wrapping paper, it could be scrapbook paper. What I wound up doing is taking, I had some watercolor paper. It turns out that right before this quarantine, I got rid of like all of my wrapping paper stock. Of course I did. So I didn't actually have any lying around, but I just took some watercolor paper and some watercolors and I made some just ombre sheets of paper, and that's really what I was using. So any kind of paper that you have will wind up looking nice, and then any ribbon that you happen to have as well works. You could even end up using your t-shirt yarn for this. The basic idea is that you're going to be layering on these different papers and ribbons in horizontal stripes and over each other if you want to. So it's a pretty straightforward idea, but it can get really creative, and you kind of have to work with what you have, which I think is a fun challenge in itself. So I have here for today's, it was a can of mandarin oranges. I would suggest taking off any outer wrappings that you have and making sure that it's perfectly dry before you choose to work with it. Otherwise your glue is just, and the paper is going to get all messed up. So I take off the wrapping. And then, like I said, you kind of want to look at what you have. You could do this with a plastic bottle as well and cut it. But a lot of these tins underneath the wrapping actually have a really shiny metal, sometimes silver. This one has a gold rim, so I kind of want to work around that. I'm going to take, and I think I'm going to use the pink paper that I have. And for this one, I would measure it. You don't want it to wind up looking like you just taped or glued some paper onto a tin. So the more precise that you can be with this one, the better off it's going to wind up looking. So I would just measure 2 things. One, I would wrap this around my paper at first to see how much I need circumference-wise, and then just make a mark for myself. And of course, leave a little extra. You don't want to perfectly match because you want to be able to overlap. So there's none of that metal showing if you don't want it to. And then this is where it gets interesting. I'm going to do a couple of different layers, but I do want some of the metal to be showing. So I think I might actually just do a pink strip through the middle. So in that case, I'm going to kind of take my ruler, see how long I want that particular strip to look. And it looks like 1 inch would pretty much do it for me. So I'm going to go ahead, do 1 inch here. Okay. Then you can just cut your paper to size. And I'm going to go ahead and mark the other side, and yeah, on the right side. Don't want to mark up the side that's actually going to be showing. I've done that before too. Do that, and then just measure the straight line between your 2 dots. A couple of other hacks I found. If you have a glue gun lying around, this is definitely much easier with a glue gun. Anytime you're trying to attach paper or ribbon to a material that's not also paper, glue gun is the easiest way to go, but I know a lot of people don't have those at home. So you can do it with just regular Elmer's glue, or even Scotch tape would work fine. With the Scotch tape, you're probably just going to have a backside that maybe doesn't look quite as nice, but it works. Another hack for the Elmer's glue, since it takes longer to dry, if you have clothespins hanging around, they can be really helpful to kind of hold whatever you've glued in place while that glue dries. But none of that is necessary. It's just helpful if you happen to have it hanging around. Okay, once I've got my strip, I'm going to place it, and I kind of want to eyeball where I think I want it to go. And then it works best, I think, to put a little bit of the glue around on your actual tin, and then a little bit on the back of your paper as well. But keep in mind, you are going to have to hold it for a couple of minutes with this Elmer's glue. Glue gun would go super fast and easy. This just takes longer to dry, but it does stick. Especially better on tins, I would even say, than glass. When I did the salsa jar, it was a little trickier. But yeah, the tins stuck pretty well with the paper and Elmer's glue. And you don't need a lot, because if you were to squeeze back down the paper onto this and there was a ton of extra glue, it's going to squeeze out the sides, and then that's not going to look very nice or polished. So do a little on there, a little bit on the back of my paper strip or wrapping paper strip, whatever you have, ribbon. And then you're just going to, actually this helps that I have that mirror there. Didn't have that earlier. Wrap it around. And then you're just gonna have to either hold it or get a clothespin. One thing I found, inevitably you will get a little bit of glue falling out. If you get a Q-tip, some soap and water, right after it starts to dry, you get it on there, it will come off and it'll still look nice and shiny. I'm gonna make sure mine's nice and tight. And then I think I am going to put my clothespin on just so that I can keep going. Hopefully it's, yeah. So you see, it works with a smaller tin. If you were doing horizontal stripes lower down, what I did on, oh, good grief, on this coffee tin is that between the two strips, I actually put a piece of Scotch tape to hold these two together. Now, if it is paper like mine, it'll rip up a little bit of it, but if it's on the back, it doesn't make that much of a difference. But if you really want it to look perfect, then you just have to be more patient than I am and sit and hold it for a couple of minutes while it dries. Grab another clothespin. Okay. So then this is where the layering of it comes in. It looks really nice to have different types of materials added on. So I have a couple of different types of ribbon that I just had hanging around from the holidays. I'm thinking, there goes one of my cats. I'm thinking that this red might look nice with the pink. So you can see how it'll start to really, as you add more of these horizontal striped layers, it'll really start to come together. I'll probably do one more horizontal, and then I want to show you one thing that you can do with some thinner strips to make it look a little more interesting too. But definitely, as you add on different textures, it starts to make it look more interesting. So I'm going to cut, then I'm going to measure it first. And I like, with these tins, like I said, work with the materials that you have to add or to leave a little bit of this silver between each of these. It already looks shiny. So I think it actually adds something to it. And I'm just gonna cut, I'm actually gonna do 2 of these red strips, I think, for mine. And these can be good. I've seen online people do, I've just been putting like this coffee tin, this has water in it, and these are live flowers. With this one that I made out of the salsa jar, these are just some fake flowers that I had, but I did see some people actually were potting like succulents in them and making real plant holders too. So lots of different uses. All right, same method I'm going to use with the ribbon. I'm just going to do a thin line on my tin. And I would try to keep all of the seams on the same point on your tin so that you don't have seams kind of running all around 360. You want to keep the back so you can just keep that facing one direction. I'm going to go to where my seam is. And my second strip. The ribbon seems to be sticking a little better than the paper wanted to. What I have found with the ribbon that's nice in this particular craft is that it was already usually existing in a circular pattern, so it kind of wants to mold to that shape anyway. So I don't find myself having to hold that down for very long. So then I do just kind of go around, and the straighter you can make those lines in between your horizontal sections, the better. Okay, so we're getting a good start here. And I think what I'll show you now is maybe what something with the gold, with a thinner ribbon, what you can do instead of the horizontal stripes that I think looks really neat. And of course, this thinner ribbon really is so much easier with hot glue, but you can do it. You can do it with just the Elmer's, but actually I might try to just do this one with Scotch tape. I really like the look of, in contrast to these horizontal stripes, you can add in, oh, am I lighting, some going crossways as well. So I could add one there and then another one maybe going, so maybe across here, across here. And the benefit of doing those is that I think that it kind of detracts from any imperfections that you might have. So actually, let me show you on this one. These lines are pretty straight, but as I was fooling around with this and I started to kind of envision doing that, I think it makes it a little more interesting, but it also might detract from the fact that I didn't get perfectly straight lines while I was gluing these things on. So it's just another option that I wanted to point out for something you could do. Certainly do not have to. So I don't know whether or not I want to do that on this one. I think maybe for this, I'm actually just going to do one more red around the top and kind of keep it like that. And then maybe one gold around the center just to show you the layering of the ribbons. So go ahead. And I see Michelle said she's going to try the flower pot. Yes. I think they look so good with the flowers in them. And I really like this, the coffee tin. I kind of ended up just using that because that's what I happened to have lying around. But with the ridges that were already in it, it added a really cool three-dimensional kind of effect to it that I didn't think about, but wound up being really neat. Okay. There we go. You can see how these stripes just start to come together. And I will do one strip of the gold ribbon. Just forgot to measure it. Oh my goodness, workspaces get messy so quick. At least when I do things. That might not be an everybody thing. Okay. Got this one. So like I said, these thin ribbons are kind of tricky with the Elmer's glue. I think I just wound up doing, instead of trying to put any glue on this thin of ribbon, I would just try to do as straight as you can a thin strip or a thin line of glue around the actual base or centerpiece where you think you're going to put it, because it's just too thin and flimsy and it just winds up getting all over the place. I'm going to actually put it right on top because what I wanted to show you was layering between the different papers and the different ribbons that you happen to have can start to create a cool effect. Of course, if you just wanted something more simple, with this watercolored paper that I did with the ombre, you could just cover the entire thing, you know, measure it out and just do one layer of one pattern. And I'm sure that would look quite nice as well. Okay, so there we go. So you can just see that it starts to add different layers. You could even add another gold strip up here, another gold strip down here, whatever you have. You know, this is just totally creative license with this one. So yeah, then for this one, I think you could definitely, it's small enough. This would be great for a little succulent plant. Some soil in there. So that is the general idea for a really simple centerpiece out of things that you just have lying around, but otherwise would wind up going in the trash or to a recycling center. So the last things I'll say, because we are almost out of time here, is just yet again, please watch the recording. I know that we went through these kinds of quick. It's mostly just to give you some inspiration for some things you can do while we're all hanging out at home, making the best of a bad situation. So watch that, watch out for that. It'll be on the Facebook event page, and then there will be the survey that's emailed out. So please give us feedback on whether you would like more interactive or more of just a demonstration, more art, more science, whatever you want to see. I'm so happy that you joined us, and please, please, please enjoy this beautiful day. The weather is so nice, and stay well, okay?